This is a story about a cartoonist. You may not know his name, but his books have touched the lives of millions, won every major cartoon prize, and earned international acclaim. The cartoonist is Jeff Smith, and in the world of comics, he's a superstar, especially since the publication of his epic comic book, Bone, hailed by critics as one of the greatest graphic novels of all time.
Most comic books are group efforts, and the fact that one person wrote and drew this entire narrative, conceived, wrote and drew the narrative, is truly astonishing.
Jeff Smith is like the greatest living cartoonist in America, I think is how I felt.
Honestly, it's the same way I feel if I look at like a drawing by Degas or something where you see a technique there. It's like, wow, there's no sense of envy. It's more like, wow, I gotta work better.
People thought we were, gonna do something unheard of or unprecedented.
It was kind of like the British invasion of music.
The line went as far as we could see. It was like Elvis was in the building.
I've never really seen a fan reaction like that.
Things got a little crazy.
People are like crushing the desk, and he has to get up on the desk and tell people to come back, or they're going to be a stampede and deaths and suffocation in front of his face. That's weird.
I'd never seen anything like it. There was like crowds of people around the booth, and they all had, I swear to God, had wads of money in their hands. And they're all like trying to buy these books.
The fact that he succeeded in his dream, I think, is really very exciting and wonderful, and a testimony to hard work and sacrifice and devotion that we need to celebrate.
His work is classic in the sense that once you've seen it, it's hard to ever imagine that there was a time that it wasn't there.
Comics have not gotten a lot of respect throughout their history. They've been blamed for causing juvenile delinquency. There was actually Senate hearings in the 50s.
It is my opinion, without any reasonable doubt and without any reservation, that comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
Today, comic books have gained a level of respectability that would have been shocking in years past. No longer blamed for juvenile delinquency, comics have evolved and changed with each generation, and in the process, have become a major influence on pop culture.
Something very powerful about comics that I think is just beginning to be understood.
At some level, Jeff Smith and his fans are representative of the changes that have occurred in the comics industry. Attracting large crowds wherever he appears, Jeff Smith has demonstrated that comic books can tell stories that both entertain and make you think. He's an American success story, a living example of the self-made man who took a chance and followed his dreams. He's touched the lives of many people, and with the publication of Bone, he's earned the admiration and appreciation of an army of fans.
It's just really masterfully done.
It's like something people of all ages can enjoy.
Whether you're 8 or 80, there's something in this book for you.
I'm having my whole 5th grade class read it right now, and they're just passing it around and teaching each other how to follow a comic strip, and it's been fabulous to watch.
I can never put them down because they were so good. I really, really want to read all the books.
I've read it 9 times. It's like so good I never get tired of it.
When we first found out that they were out by Scholastic, we went out and bought the first 5 books for her, and she had read all of them by the end of the weekend, and that's when she was 5. And she had read all of them by the end of the weekend, and that's when she was 5.
Bone was never intended for children. It was always written mainly for me, and second for other cartoon heads. I never dreamed it would, have, a huge audience of children around the world. I never thought that, because comics in the early 90s when I started were primarily sold in comic book shops, And all the customers at comic shops were like me, 30-year-old guys.
Bone tells the comic adventure story of three cousins banished from their home of Boneville. Phone Bone, gentle, kind, and brave. Smiley Bone, good-natured and fun. And Phony Bone, who always has a scheme. Entering a magical, mysterious valley filled with wonderful and terrifying creatures, they meet the beautiful Thorn, her tough Grandma Ben, the rat creatures, the great red dragon, and a host of other colorful characters.
It's unusual, but I think it's pretty easy to understand if you think of it as Bugs Bunny meets The Lord of the Rings. It's a really long fairy tale with some fantasy elements, but a lot of comedy, too.
Virtually any real strong work of fiction, I think, has a variety of tones to it. It represents the variety of the tones of life. So, to me, it's more an aberration to not have that mixture of humor and gravity that Jeff does so well. What he's doing, it's only right.
There have been a lot of cartoonists that want to do more with the medium. They want to tell stories, and stories, have consequences. There's usually a conflict. And I do think stories should have a moral point of view.
The Bone storyline is a pretty simple, straightforward story about three bone cousins who get lost, and they discover a valley that's filled with dragons and rat creatures and princesses and war and all the things that they've kind of been sheltered from their whole lives.
There's the sensible one who's like Phone Bone, and then you have your comic relief friend who's always making jokes, that's your Smiley Bone, and then you maybe have somebody who's a little more self-important, like Phony Bone.
The three Bone cousins, I always thought were just manifestations of my own personality. In fact, even Grandma Ben and Thorn are to some degree. But I think that about all great strips. I think probably Popeye was a big part of Elsie Seeger. Peanuts is the best example of all. There's no question that when you read Charlie Brown, obviously that's Sparky.
Yeah.
But so is Snoopy.
I actually probably did Bone comics that are no longer around, as early as age 5. I was drawing the Bone characters for sure in kindergarten, which I think you're like 5 years old. And I kind of wanted to make up a cartoon character. And I made up a lot of them. But for some reason, this weird little one who kind of looked like a bone just stuck with me.
Pretty much every cartoonist I've ever talked to tells stories about being reprimanded in school by teachers who didn't like the fact that they drew all day, every day, in their books, in the margin of their math papers, whatever. And I think Jeff was that kind of little boy. The difference, the thing that sets the successful cartoonists apart is the fact that they can't stop drawing. This is something that they can't imagine not doing.
I was always drawn to comics and cartoons, and I think the ones that were the most fun to me were Peanuts. I mean, that's the first one I remember, wanting to have, my dad read those to me, on a Sunday morning, and really wanting to know what was going on. In fact, I learned to read because, I wanted to know what Charlie Brown was saying. I wanted to know what Snoopy was doing and what Linus was up to.
It was interesting as a very young man because he understood as a cartoonist, it was important for him to find out his roots, who had been cartoonists that were ahead of him from whom he might learn.
A major influence on Jeff and the Bone Adventures was Carl Barks, the creator of Donald Duck's uncle, Scrooge McDuck, the world's richest duck.
Carl Barks was just a very natural comics genius. He knew how to move characters through panels. He knew how to have the characters move and look like they're full of life. You could always tell what the characters were thinking. Their eyes were always, letting you inside. They're just very exciting comics. And I always wanted Uncle Scrooge to go on a longer adventure. I thought, man, if you could just get a comic book like that, of that quality, the length of, say, you know, War and Peace or the Odyssey or something, that would be something I would love to read. And even as a kid, I looked everywhere for that book, for that Uncle Scrooge story that was, you know, 1,100 pages long.
In addition to Carl Barks, Smith was influenced by the work of Walt Kelly, whose colorful characters from the Okefenokee Swamp shared their views on the current events of the day.
Around the age of 9, when I was like in the 4th grade, I remember there was a show on TV that was like a Pogo animated special. And it was done by Walt Kelly and by Chuck Jones, who I didn't know really either of those names at the time. But of course, now those are like two of my most favorite people. The day after that show was on the air, a girl came to school and she brought with her a Pogo book. And I was kind of the cartoon guy at school. I was the kid who drew, you know, and everybody knew I liked cartoons. And so after this Pogo special had been on TV, she found one of her dad's books. I don't know if she asked his permission or anything, but she brought it to school and gave it to me. And in fact, that's it right there. And I still have it right by my desk. And that actually just changed comics for me. I never turned back.
Pogo is the comic strip that Walt Kelly created in the late 1940s with a bunch of swamp critters. And Pogo basically is the possum who is sort of one of the leaders of this bunch of swamp critters, and it's hilarious. Kelly also, though, was one of the first people to take on Senator Joseph McCarthy and to paint him as a truly evil, bad person. And he did this in the context of the swamp with these funny animals, and it was a very courageous thing that he did. And so for people in the cartooning world, Walt Kelly is a true giant because he showed great courage and used his medium to make a difference.
Moby Dick is my favorite book, and if you're familiar with Bone, you'll know there's many references to it. Moby Dick is this big book that's just layered like an onion with different meanings, and every time you read it, you can get something else out of it. There's lots of symbolism, and I just love that. That, to me, that's what that experience of a story should be. It should just really fire your imagination like that. And I wanted Bone to be a long, multi-layered book like that, and I fill it full of symbolism. The other book I was sort of trying to pattern it after structurally was Huckleberry Finn. And the kinds of stories I'm drawn to, like Huckleberry Finn, are the ones that start off like very simple, almost like children's stories. They're just boys' adventure stories. But as they develop, Star Wars is like that too, you know? Like it starts off just swashbuckling and exciting, it's adventure. But as the story evolves, as it goes on, it gets a little darker and the themes become a little more sophisticated, and it's just more complex. And those are the kinds of stories that really get me going.
A lot of people think that comics are just about a particular genre. In fact, they think of comics as a genre. It's all about superheroes or funny animals. Comics is actually just the art of putting one picture after another. It can accommodate any sort of story, it can accommodate any art style, it can even accommodate things other than paper and ink. So it's wide open, and I think a lot of what we've done with comics is just a tiny little settlement on the one coast of a big continent.
The first time I was drawing Bone, I used to just sit in front of the TV set at my, either at my mom's house or at my grandmother's house or something like that. And I had these big sheets of paper, and I just used to love to draw.
When he was a kid, he could just draw. He just could. I don't know why. I would be sitting there, and my drawings, you know, are hairy and sketchy, right? And Jeff could just draw it. Well, you know, 5 lines, and there it is, and move on. He's just the real thing.
I found this one character that I was drawn that became Bone. But for some reason, I started off drawing him like really angry, you know, like just making these snarling faces with his mouth just open as far as it could be. And then I remember the construction problems of figuring out, well, how do you take that character whose mouth is, this wide open, and figure out what he looks like with his mouth closed. And I got very interested in just the problems of keeping the character consistent and seeing what he looked like when he was thinking different things.
First drawing of the Bone Cousins, and do you still have it?
I do not still have it, but it was when I was about 5 or so. I was sitting in the living room on the floor drawing like I did all the time, and I remember drawing something that looked like almost like a letter C, actually like a telephone receiver. Remember those?
Hello?
I didn't know this was going to be about how old we were. But anyway, I had this little character. It was like as if his mouth was wide open, and he was frowning, and his tongue was out, and he was screaming, and just a little body with arms, and he looked like a phone. And I think that's where it started. And that character kind of became Phony Bone later, the more upset cousin. And the name Phone Bone came because my dad used to read Mad Magazine to me, and I loved Don Martin. And there never was the same characters in Don Martin. It wasn't the same characters every day. It was always somebody different, like a doctor or a mailman or something. But whenever he would name someone, he had this generic name, Mr. Phone Bone.
Wow, I remember that, and yet when I saw Bone, I never made the connection.
I used to draw little stories, like just in little pads of paper, little tales of the bones falling off cliffs, being chased by monsters, pretty much all the same stuff I still draw stories about. But it wasn't until after high school that I began to really think about drawing for a living.
All the way through high school, I never thought I would draw comics, because it seemed as ridiculous as wanting to be a movie star or something, or a rock star or something. It just, that wasn't real. You have to go to school and get a degree and do something respectable.
Yeah, we actually thought the career was glamorous back then.
Yeah. I'm going to get girls and a fast car because I'm going to draw comics. The girls are going to dig this.
Jeff continued to pursue his passion for comics in college, and he began to polish his skills in the university newspaper.
In the early 80s, he started working on a strip for Ohio State University, and in that strip, he kind of worked out some of the story elements for what would later become Bone. So if you look at some of those early strips, it kind of foreshadows what he's going to do in the regular series.
We started doing cartoons in the Lantern. It's like a daily gig, right? You're getting up in the morning, staring at a completely blank piece of paper. And that's really where we became real cartoonists, right? It was an amazing opportunity. I don't know how you would really do it any other way, because it's a chance to fail, and it's public humiliation too. You wake up the next morning, you open the paper, and you're like, oh my God, did I really draw that?
I did it every day for 4 years. It was a daily thing, which was really the best way to learn your trade that you can imagine. I mean, you just dive in and you have a deadline every single day, and I had to come up with jokes, and they're pretty horrible now. I don't really like to look at them very much, but it was like being put in a Cuisinart. I mean, I had to figure out how to draw these characters and make them consistent, and make it make sense every day in 4 little panels. It was really good training.
I was building confidence in getting people to laugh and getting reactions, and people at Ohio State aren't shy about telling you when your comic's no good either. I got a lot of that. Why isn't your comic funny?
The first comic strips we were working on together, right? That was a big mistake, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. He wanted him to feel spontaneous, so he didn't want to pencil him first. He just wanted to ink him, right? Which it's like impossible, right? It's India ink for one thing, right? If you make a mistake, it's all screwed up, but he could do it, right? His first comic strips were not penciled. He did just ink it, right? Just came off his pen, right? But yeah, we fought over that because I was like, why aren't you penciling this? Because they'd be better if he did, right?
There are a lot of people who think, oh, it's fun to draw, and wouldn't it be neat to have a comic book or a comic strip? But they do not have the passion, the fire in the belly, to make the sacrifices that it takes in order to be successful. And that's what sets people like Jeff Smith apart.
Lucy pretty much became my mentor in many ways. She was fascinating to me because, well, when you meet her, you'll see she's very proper, very intelligent Southern woman who likes comics. I mean, here was an adult who could really talk smack about comics, and very intelligently.
It was one of those lucky happenstances that there was a new reprint book series of Popeye pages that the library was buying, and it was pretty expensive, and Jeff couldn't afford to get it, and he came in and sat day after day and read Popeye.
I just gravitated down to that room where there was all these original pieces of art from, you know, Terry and the Pirates. And even then she was starting to broaden the collection and get, you know, pieces from Peanuts and Doonesbury. And she was collecting, you know, this was like 1984 or something, so there were no graphic novels, but there were starting to be little collections of old comic strips. And, you know, here I am, and, you know, trying to draw these comic strips, and for the first time, really, there are collections available of the masters.
In the beginning, Jeff's goal was to create a daily syndicated comic strip.
He got together a syndicate package, and he was in development at King Features, I guess, but it never really worked out right. They wanted him to make a gag-a-day thing, which isn't really what he does.
And so, instead of newspapers, he began to look at the animation business.
In between college and starting up the comic book, I started up an animation studio with two buddies of mine, Jim Camerood and Marty Fuller. Cartoons to us, you know, we weren't just comic strips or comic books. We were like, if animation, sort of cartooning was the big umbrella idea for us. And we would actually, you know, animate things for fun.
We did some animation in college. I remember distinctly having cells, you know, cells, those clear pieces of plastic that you have to like paint on, right? All over the living room and everywhere, right? And painting all these things over long weekends and thinking that it was a really dumb way to make a movie, and Jeff and I swore we would never do it again.
What am I doing?
Because it's just such a ridiculous thing to do, is to just stare into a light bulb and just draw thousands of pictures. But we loved it, and Marty suggested we form a company. He said we know some people in town who, you know, we could probably work with and do some local commercial work and stuff.
We call our company Character Builders because we wanted to hang on to traditional animation, traditional character animation, the cartoon aspect of drawing and bringing characters to life.
Our pal Marty Fuller, who we met at OSU, he like knew how to work the camera and stuff, right? And Marty got some gig.
Our first paid gig was to produce an animated opening for a television pilot for a show called Super Safari, starring Jack Hanna, the famous animal guy.
Let's all go with Jack and the pack on a super safari. A super safari could be here on the block or to the pole and back. On a super safari, a super safari.
We did this 60 seconds of animation again, and someone paid us money to draw cartoons, which is really the whole point, right? To get somebody to pay you to do what you're gonna do anyway.
Warner Cableman.
Hello, citizens. Allow me to transform your TV into vibrant vistas of vitality with this, the Warner Cable Live Wire.
The work of the budding animators was smart and fun, and quickly began to get noticed.
Totally awesome, eh, citizens?
even attracting the attention of the local news media.
Jeff Smith and Martin Fuller are two guys who enjoy their jobs. And why shouldn't they? They create fun. Both guys have plenty of imagination. Let's listen to why they say they got into the animation business.
Well, we started out as I was a neurosurgeon and I was a lawyer. But the money just wasn't there.
And both have talent to match their wits.
Seems like every animator sometime in their life gets to animate some sort of bacteria or fungus, something terrible. And our turn was to animate these sealants that go in your teeth. There was a small green dental bacteria character that Jeff designed, and then he ended up doing the voice for, and I don't know if he'd like to admit that, but it's still there somewhere on tape.
Character builders did a little bit of everything, even animating clay.
After the California Raisins became popular, a lot of commercial clients decided that clay animation would be something to explore for their characters, and so we were asked to do some clay animation, and not having done much before, we said, sure, we'll do clay animation, we can do that. But it has its own set of frustrations. Things melt under the lights and fall down at a very slow rate between shooting and sculpting frames, and you don't even see those mistakes until you get your film back after having worked on something for a couple weeks. So it was always interesting with clay.
In the beginning, the budgets were always tight, and it often required a degree of resourcefulness to meet the punishing deadlines for commercials.
We'd get moms and dads and friends in, and we'd pay them with pizza and drinks to come in for an evening and help us to get through a binge of a couple thousand cells to paint for a commercial. But a deadline's a deadline, and people were mostly happy to do it. There were all-nighters, trying to produce things for commercial broadcast deadlines, and then there were moments of drought where you're soul-searching and wondering if this is really what you should be doing. And I think it was during one of those moments that Jeff just jumped in with both feet into the idea of producing Bone.
We made, television commercials, and eventually we, got good enough that we could do whole sequences on Hollywood films when they would, fall behind. They would look for places who could take 10 minutes of a film and work on it, and we would do that. It was very exciting, but it wasn't the kind of cartooning I really wanted to do. And I started to lose interest in, doing commercials, and was starting to get drawn toward this idea that you could kind of do your own animated movie, but in a comic book.
Jeff Smith is like the greatest living cartoonist in America, I think is how I felt, right? And I always knew that he would be successful. And I loved what he was doing. I was positive that it would work out.
He learned a lot during his years with character builders about timing and about how to make characters relate to one another and how to communicate emotion with physical aspects of a character.
If you're thinking like an animator and drawing a comic book, then his panels often time out. The gags feel the same way, like you're feeling them in time. Instead of just talking his way through something, he's drawing his way through all these different emotions that a character feels. He goes from impatient here to hugging Smiley here, and to manipulative, to, in just a couple short pages, you're seeing 10 different emotions in the characters.
The place where he comes from with like his understanding of like the old men at Disney, this sort of like the effortless simplicity of animation, to put that kind of technique back into comics. That's really exciting.
This is something that a lot of comics artists of our generation tend to avoid. We tend to vary the camera angle pretty aggressively because it's just easier. You draw that figure once, and if you then go to a close-up, you don't have to be consistent. You don't have to do the hard work of making sure that the feet are exactly the same size in every panel and you stay on model. Well, that kind of discipline is typical of animation.
The animation business was good to Jeff and influenced his future style, but he'd never given up his dreams of the big book. the comic that was epic in scope.
I did the animation company for about 7 years. During that period, I was thinking and I was reading, and I came up with the story, and I had the end of the story, and I didn't know how big it was, but I knew it was going to be big. I wanted it to be huge. I wanted that Uncle Scrooge story that was as big as the Odyssey. Very first time I sat down to draw the comic book Bone, it was like having, you know, the gates open up. I went from working in this much space and to infinite, really. It's like you have 4 panels. You have to get any point you want to make, anything has to be, it's done in those 4 panels. Yeah. And it's got to be interesting enough to get people to come back. It's hard to tell a joke in 4 panels. I don't know, probably a lot of you people are, have wanted to do comics or have tried it anyway. It's hard, which is why I got a lot of letters saying, why aren't you funny? But as soon as I had an infinite number of panels, I mean, I could spend 5 panels to tell a joke. I could take 20 panels. And as I got going, as you know, I would take whole issues. Oh, yeah. Or, that was actually, I used to get in trouble for that, because I would have one scene take like 2 or 3 issues to get through. And I'd get people going, what are you doing? I was like, it'll make sense when it's all together. It'll make sense. Then as I discovered comic book stores and this underground independent scene where people were doing their own stories, people were doing non-corporate properties, they were doing their own stuff. There were people, who were writing and drawing their own comics. In 1986, there were 3 books that were huge. One of them was Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. And it just kind of came out of nowhere, really. It was a Batman story that wasn't part of the normal Batman series, and it was a long story, about 200 pages long, that had a beginning and a middle and an end. But what was really interesting to me was Frank's storytelling abilities. He didn't do stuff the way most comics are done. When you think of comics, generally speaking, especially back then, you think of, Superman or Wonder Woman just, running and flying, and there's like a little box in the corner that says, meanwhile. Well, Frank took a very different approach to the visual aspect of how he told his stories. He used bigger panels. He colored it different. He used much higher quality papers. And most important for me, he completely dispatched with the little meanwhile box and just approached the storytelling like you would if you were making a film. And it was when I saw Dark Knight Returns that I said, you can do that giant story I always wanted to see. You could do it. This medium can sustain the big one. Art Spiegelman's Mouse definitely had a huge impact on me and on the whole comic book industry, because it was not Batman. It was a very personal story about Art Spiegelman's father, who was a Holocaust survivor. And he used this metaphor of Jews being mice and Nazis being cats. It was just a real moment in comics where you could see that just about anything could really be accomplished. And the third big book in 1986 was Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. The 3 of them together really just caught everyone in comics by surprise. Publishers, readers, just everyone. And it really kind of showed that, a serious structure to a comic book with a beginning and a middle and an end was artistically viable and commercially viable.
Jeff and I would talk about the comic way back when. While he was making the comic strip, we were drawing big fantasy epic things and reading Tolkien, and we're heavily influenced by the Lord of the Rings and stuff. And that's the movie we want to make, some cool movie with swords and dragons and I don't know what all.
I began reading about the authors that I liked, like Tolkien. and I liked the Star Wars movies. So I was reading about like what inspired George Lucas, what inspired Tolkien. And it all came basically down to old fairy tales and mythology.
There is a long tradition in Western narrative of having your hero go on a search, and the search will result in this person discovering a foreign, strange, peculiar place that holds threats of a variety of kind. And this is, of course, the tradition in which the Bone narrative is written.
You know, it equates to the journey of life. You have trials and tribulations, you meet obstacles, there are enemies who are trying to stop you and hold you back. I mean, these kind of themes are as old as storytelling itself. The three Bone cousins are pretty recognizable. I mean, they're Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. They're the Marx Brothers. You know what I mean? They're a trio of slapstick comedians, and everybody kind of knows those kinds of characters. And I thought, start them on the journey, but keep it light and funny, because I know my reaction if I see something that looks like this is a great and grand story full of elves and dwarves, and I'm turned off by that kind of stuff. So I actually wanted to kind of hide the fact that it was a big epic fantasy for as long as I could.
The idea was there, and now it was time to execute his plans. But self-publishing is not without its challenges. Just ask Harvey Pekar, whose life working on a shoestring is documented in his autobiographical comics and the feature film American Splendor.
Well, first of all, unless you're independently wealthy, you got to get the money. And that often, involves sacrifices. Like in my case, I was a file clerk at the VA hospital. I didn't have a large income.
My wife and I could tell you stories about scrounging for pennies and couch cushions.
I didn't anticipate all the hard work that was involved in making and distributing and promoting your own comic book.
It's expensive, yeah. I mean, you have to have a cash flow.
For the same reason that, people trying to get into music or acting, it's the same thing. It's only a tiny percentage that ever makes any money. And those of us who did make money at it, we know how lucky we are.
It's murder. There's just relatively few people that make a living as full-time comic book artists.
Jeff's wife, Vijaya, was always his biggest fan and supporter, but she was practical as well.
Well, he was going to quit his day job. It's like, you can't just go, I'm going to quit my job and maybe everything will work out.
She said, think about it, make a business plan that would be good enough to show to a bank. And if it makes sense, sure, take a year and, try it.
I thought that was a pretty fair thing to ask for when you're selling your animation company and starting from scratch doing comic books, which to me was, kind of crazy, The first issue sold maybe 2,000 copies, maybe less. And then, as he kept going, it flatlined for a while, and then people started picking up interest.
And I started to see reviews of it in trade journals like the Comics Buyer's Guide, or I think the fourth issue got a mention in the Comics Journal, in like the back, in like a little quick hits thing, like this might be something worth checking out. A few other creators started mentioning it in their reviews. People say, well, what are you reading right now? And like Neil Gaiman said, I'm reading this Bone book and I'm really liking it. And when I started to see that, I was like, I was so excited. I was like really impressed because, I really thought very highly of the Sandman series. But I also started to have this hope that maybe this isn't doomed.
By the sixth issue, it was kind of looking like, oh, well, this might actually, something might actually happen here.
This was 1992 right when the first internet chat rooms were starting up. Before even the web as we know it today, there were like little chat clubs and little tiny places on the internet where you could talk about comics. And Bone was one of the earliest comics to like be recommended online by, you know, a comics group. And then suddenly, all over the world, people can read that and say, well, I want to find that book.
Bone came at a very interesting time. Much of the alternative comics, the self-published comics, independent comic scene, whatever you call it, these black and white, short-run comics that were being printed in the 90s, many of them were very iconoclastic. That is, they took advantage of their freedom to publish things that were more adult, more provocative, more edgy. Along comes Jeff Smith publishing something that looks classic, all ages, fun, well-crafted, and just with such a quality of storytelling above all other things.
When Bone came out, there was absolutely nothing like it, and we all agreed, you know, all of us sitting around talking behind Jeff's back, that is, we all agreed that he was extraordinarily talented, and we were just sure it wasn't going to sell because cartoony doesn't sell.
I was doing everything myself. I was packing the boxes and putting them on the UPS truck, and I was, you know, drawing the comics. I was trying to answer the letters in the letters columns and do all the graphics work for which was all by hand in those days. We didn't have Photoshop. You know, I had to actually like physically paste letters down onto pieces of paper and send them to the printer. And I was starting to screw up, basically. I was letting books fall out of print. I was not getting orders fulfilled. I was not drawing comics.
For a lot of the guys who came into self-publishing, this became a real concern at a certain point, because at a certain point, you're self-sustaining, that's all good. You can make a living at it, you have enough money to do the things you want to do and work and take some time off. But then to actually run a business and grow, you know, on a shoestring, it's difficult.
This torture! This torment! I can't stand it!
I lived in this little tiny cabin in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I'd have a closet full of boxes of, you know, like, here's my stack of 1s, 2s, and 3s. You know this, sitting around. And you're like, okay, so, and I'm selling to every store, any store in America that wanted a Bone, you know, wanted 2 copies of number 3, 1 copy of number 4. I went and picked them out and I sent them to them. And I was doing that instead of drawing comics, and I was starting to fall tragically behind.
I went to Vijaya and I explained the problem, and I basically asked her to quit her job in this little Silicon Valley startup company in 1992 where she was making a really good salary. I asked her to quit that job and come help me do this. Once she took over the business and took over all the invoicing and the books and order fulfillment, everything just went so much more smoothly. I could concentrate on the comics, and the orders began to double exponentially every single issue the book came out.
It was a difficult decision and it was a struggle, but in the end, I think I made the right choice.
Dang, the woman's really smart, and she's very efficient, and she kept Jeff at the drawing board producing the book. And too many of us, myself included, kept going off on these little tangents, and you can't do that. You gotta just stick with it.
It's unique being in an environment where there's the husband and wife team. You know, I mean, they spend, you know, their personal time together, and then they spend, you know, the working day together, and they just, you know, complement each other so well, and just have the same way of thinking that makes them work so well together.
The comic book industry was changing when Jeff began Bone. One of the people who began to notice the transformation was Terry Moore, whose self-published work includes such noted comics as Strangers in Paradise and Echo.
Normally I thought everything was Marvel, DC, it was either Superman or talking animals. Well, suddenly there was this emergence of this movement of self-publishers, and it was a little bit like the alternative cartoonist era, but this one was more approachable wrote, and it was inspiring because I saw that you could take a comic book format and write and draw about anything you wanted to.
Sometime in 1993, I believe, I got together with some other self-publishers to do like a print. It was Dave Sim, James Owen, Martin Wagner, and Colleen Doran, and myself. And the idea was, you know, to just try to come up with a little art piece that was limited, signed by all of us, to just kind of just generate some interest. You know, there's power in numbers.
There was a brat pack, I call them the brat pack of self-publishers. These guys were the original batch that showed up, it seemed like all in the same year with their books, and they kind of bonded. When they went to a convention hall, they were mobbed.
When we showed up, the 5 self-publishers showed up at a convention. I mean, we weren't all at the same booth, but we would do a signing together. We would have our little print. It was electric. People thought we were, you know, going to do something unheard of or unprecedented. And in fact, it became the self-publishing movement. And people started just self-publishing their own comics, and eventually it became like 17% of the whole industry. It was a huge movement.
Self-publishing was the coolest of all possible cool things to do. It was the geek equivalent of being a rock star.
It was kind of like the British invasion of music. And what they did was open up the retail stores so that they would look at other self-published work. So when I came along in the second wave, a couple of years later, all doors were open for people like me. And so I'm very grateful for the Brat Pack and a little jealous that I wasn't in it.
That was the moment where things got a little crazy. I mean, we would go to a comic book convention, we would start at 9 in the morning, we would be mobbed. Anywhere we would go together, if even it was to the restaurant, people were asking us to draw and do sketches. We couldn't hardly even take a break for lunch.
The line went as far as we could see. It went out the ballroom, and it went out the door, and it went down the hall. And then you had these big comic book companies filing complaints with the convention because we were causing crowds in front of their booths, and nobody could get to their booths.
I think it was 1994, some store in Houston, Bedrock City Comics. Jeff was doing a signing, and I was new. They invited me to bring my little books and sit next to him at the signing. So I go into this store, and the store was packed full of people, say 200-300 people waiting to talk to Jeff. And I sit next to him with my book, and everybody walks right by me going to Jeff. And it was inspiring. I watched. Even at that early stage, he was already comfortable and accomplished and very popular, and he's been my mentor ever since.
Jeff began to forge new ties with the comic book industry, and soon he joined fellow artists Charles Vess and Linda Medley for what they called the Trilogy Tour, a national tour of comic book shops and conventions, traveling together on the road with huge portable sets of standing stones and a giant hollow tree.
We just, hopped in a van and drove to all the major conventions of the day and did a few store signings in between. And that was the first year. And then the second year, we expanded and added 3 more artists to the tour.
We spent a month on the road and went across country, and it was a blast. It was a blast. We did have people lining up then. We got to the Chicago Comic-Con, and I tell you, but the line just weaved on and on and on.
It was mind-blowing to see, how many people lined up to see him and how excited they were. I mean, it was like literally, not to be cliche, but it was like Elvis was in the building.
He's like a rock star now, right? It's weird, especially I think when he was first doing this comic. And there would be, people lined up to get his signature, and they would go all the way down the convention center and outside the hotel, and they're around the block to get his signature. It's weird, right?
I'd never seen anything like it. There was crowds of people around the booth, and they all had, I swear to God, had wads of money in their hands. And they're all like trying to buy these books. And I had one helper, this guy named Garrett, who was helping me. And Garrett, he was like a little phony bone. He loved money. And he's just like, this is so much fun. We would go back to the hotel afterwards and he'd rub the money on his head.
Jeff and Bone's popularity wasn't limited to the U.S. From the earliest days of the Bone comics, foreign markets began to take notice.
I think the fans overseas really appreciate more than anything. They actually treat comics as literature and high art. And because Jeff's drawing style is so visually pleasing, it's just a phenomenon over there.
It's published in at least 24 countries.
I'd say our biggest fans are our French fans, our Spanish fans, and our German fans.
In Germany, the company there that licensed it and started to publish it, they said we actually had a debate. I remember, like, they were saying, well, what should we call it in German? And you know, I love the idea of it having a different name in every language, you know, because we've always heard that about Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or something. And in Finland, it was called Lupat. And I thought, well, what is the word for bone in German? And they said, I think the answer was Knochen. And I said, that's perfect. So FOMO's name will be Knochen Knochen. And I was like, this is fantastic. I love that. And they just did not think that was funny. They thought, that's terrible. We will call it Bone.
They just welcome him with open arms whenever he comes over for foreign festivals and things like that. He's even more popular over there, I would say, than he is here.
Or he's in Europe and people are like crushing the desk and he has to get up on the desk and tell people to come back or they're gonna be a stampede and deaths and suffocation in front of his face. You know, that's weird, right? And I think for the most part that hasn't gone to his head.
Many of the book's adventures occur at a place known as Old Man's Cave, a name which came from a state park that has inspired Jeff since he was a boy.
Old Man's Cave in the story, it's the physical center of the valley, and it's also the literal center of the novel itself. You can come down to the caves here any time of year, any kind of weather, and there's always something amazing to see. If it's rainy weather, you know, then you have big waterfalls and the creeks are running. If you come in the winter, you know, there's giant icicles that go from the cliff tops, you know, all the way down to the bottom. You know, single icicles, it's amazing. And I especially like coming when there's like mist and fog. And as you move through the gorge here and go around corners, you know, just trees disappearing into the fog, it's very easy to use your imagination and kind of picture, you know, the Shawnee Indian coming around hunting or anything. It's just so beautiful, no matter what kind of light is down here.
Every creative person inserts personal experience into the creative process. That's inevitable. Jeff has taken growing up in Central Ohio and his love of the Hocking Hills and incorporated that, I think, into his narrative in a very beautiful way. He also has been fortunate to travel around the world, and he's incorporated that into his narrative.
Even though it was one story and people had been reading it for 12 years, I don't think people really realized that it really was one story, that if you opened it up and events on the very first page of the book were starting the story and would be echoed, you know, all the way through to the very end.
Bone is a story that's in the tradition of Lord of the Rings or Beowulf, or one of these classic, very, very serious, very mythical fantasy stories.
And I like fantasy because you can use metaphor, you can use symbols. You can talk about things with a slight oblique angle on them. And I think in some ways, giving yourself that distance from an actual topic allows you to see it a little bit better. It's almost like night vision, you know, you just kind of look a little bit off to the side and you can almost see things better. Well, I use a lot of water in Bone. Water is an age-old storytelling symbol, and its use in stories goes way back. And one of the reasons water's always used like this in stories is because water's so important to us. You know, I mean, we're mostly made of water. And so in Bone, I tried to use water whenever a significant event happens in Phone Bone's life. Well, first when he enters the valley, it's, you know, he's on the face of a huge waterfall until he falls into the water with the two stupid rat creatures directly behind him. Then when he meets Thorn a little later, you know, she's standing up to her knees in a hot spring. So even today, like now that I've given away this water as a symbol, watch it in Hollywood movies. Whenever the hero's about to crack that crisis, there'll usually be some kind of water. You know, if it's a huge rainstorm when Spider-Man kisses Mary Jane, or well, you'll see. Just watch for water in movies. It's usually at a very important emotional moment.
In 2004, Jeff finished the epic comic book that he had always dreamed of. Finally, the story that he toiled on for so many years was compiled in one book. It was more than 1,300 pages long.
I started Bone in 1991, and about every 2 months I would finish a comic book, and that each comic book was a chapter in the overall story. And I finished it in the summer of 2004. So it was 13 years, although I took a year off and did a couple of side projects and tried some screenplays. That didn't work out too good, but it was 12 years of, you know, drawing almost 7 days a week and sometimes 20 hours a day at times. It was a long haul. It's hard to make comics.
It's so hard to do this, like you just can't know. It's so hard.
At this point, I'm in almost constant discomfort in the lower back. Your hand, I think Jeff got carpal tunnel for a while. Your eyes go wonky. I don't know how many artists I know get these weird twitches from the muscle strain in their eye, and they start doing this funky thing.
Your neck hurts, your hand hurts, the deadline's there, you're all messed up, you can't possibly get it done. It's lonely, right? You sit there for hours and hours by yourself. And it's something that really you do for yourself. You can't really care if you're working in an art form or what its significance is, right? You have to do something for yourself that you can then share with other people, and hopefully they connect with it.
Let's take an outmoded art form now, like let's take the illuminated manuscript. I mean, this is, you know, the Book of Kells goes back to what, 900 AD? It's one of the earliest handmade books, I think, that exist, in the West at least. And this was the height of technology in its day. Now we appreciate it because of the heroic aspect of illustrating a book and, you know, hand writing the Bible, you know, this, you know, great cultural document for the West. And I think, in a sense, that comics falls under the shadow of this thing, you know.
I think one of the things that really does set this apart is that it's one person. Most comic books are group efforts, and the fact that one person wrote and drew this entire narrative, conceived, wrote, and drew the narrative, is truly astonishing.
Having a book like this was always Jeff's thing, right? He wanted it to be like, because there was that edition of The Lord of the Rings, which was just a big freaking book. Like, I think it had gold here, you know, and you just wanted to hold it, and it was like the Bible. And he wanted something, I think, to tell a story that felt significant, right? And epic, and
It's pretty unusual in the American market to see anything of that size. And it's a wonderful thing to just drop on a table and listen to the thunder as it falls.
Hello, Cartoon Books.
It was exciting to finally complete this epic tale, and yet the work was not yet done. A new chapter in the story was about to be written when Jeff and Vijaya were approached by Scholastic Books, publishers of the renowned Harry Potter series.
A lot of buzz had happened in the meantime where librarians were starting to pick this up and it was becoming something. And they came to us and they wowed us with a really great plan to get graphic novels into the hands of kids. And it involved a new imprint and, shelving our graphic novels with regular children's books and things like that. So, they impressed us. And I regret nothing. That was one of the best decisions we've ever made.
In the reissue of the books by Scholastic, an exciting new element was added: color. And surprisingly, one of the major advocates for color was the creator of one of the world's most famous black and white comics, Art Spiegelman.
It was just Art who really said, well, I think we should color it. And I was actually resistant at first because I'd worked really, really hard to make the artwork, work in black and white. To use blacks and whites to separate things and to push some things forward and other things back. And I like black and white. I think of Bone kind of like a comic strip, like my old love of Peanuts and Pogo. So black and white was good for me, but Art just said, no, it really needs to be in color. And I said, well, no, why, Art? Because, Mouse, one of the most famous graphic novels ever, is in black and white. And his answer was, well, Mouse is about the Holocaust. It's about war. It's about very heavy subjects. It should be in black and white. But Bone is about life, and it won't be finished until it's in color. And I thought, all right, I'll try some experiments and see how it looks in color. And, well, Art was right. Well, it took, 15 years to draw it in black and white. I had no idea how long it would take to do it in color. But fortunately, we had a guy on staff here who helps me with all my art stuff. Anything that's not drawing the comics, Steve Hamaker does. He said, well, let me take a shot at some of this color.
There's a finite amount of those people that would be willing to colorize their work. So I think working with Jeff in this capacity has been just a dream come true.
First few issues, we struggled because neither of us had ever done color before, and we worked our way through it, pretty much sitting side by side trying to figure out how does this work.
I don't want to do anything too radical with what Jeff has already done on the same front. I want to do something interesting so people are really, still entertained, if not more entertained, with the pages when we color them.
Bone had a lot of integrity as a black and white comic. So it was a bit of a surprise when the color volume started coming out, and it looked great. I think that it really works as a color comic every bit as much as a black and white.
Because Jeff has the advantage of having come from animation, where he did work with color, and he's got his background, he brought a certain skill set to his cartooning that I would say had an awareness of color, and for that matter, film editing and a number of other things, cinematography, like all the different tools and tropes that we use in filmmaking, that he was able to apply to comics, at a level of an expert, really, by the time he started comics.
What kind of impact can a book have on people, especially a comic book? Today, there is no question that comics play a significant role in our culture. For those who work in the industry, this recognition has been a long time coming.
And it's weird being a cartoonist because there are other artists who are they're in the high art, right? They're real artists. We're just cartoonists. What are we? Illustrators. It's commercial. It's some bastard art, right? But for me, it's always been the coolest art, right? You get to be an artist and you're a storyteller and a writer, and it's funny and it's scary and exciting. And I love comic books. And they're, all the movies now are comic book characters.
At this stage of the game, we've already won Hollywood. Look at what we've had. We've had $100 million films. We've had box office breakthroughs. People don't see stories having derived from comics as being comic book stories. They see them as being stories.
Any art form where you can use any word in the dictionary, all the words Shakespeare used, like he doesn't have a copyright on them, You can use the vast variety of illustration styles. They're very comparable to movies. Both of them use words and pictures.
I learned to read because I wanted to know what was going on in Peanuts, you know? I mean, comics is reading.
Kids don't start out reading because they're trying to get an education. They start out reading because they like it, and they're not going to keep reading unless you give them some incentive to keep reading, and that is reading for entertainment.
There was actually a prevailing thought in comics in the 90s that kids were lost. That kids they just don't read comics. There's too much competition from video games, from the internet, computer, TV, DVD. You can watch any movie you want. Why would you read a comic book? But I think we've seen, with manga and with the scholastic books that kids are reading comics by the millions and they like them. And I think that's because, it's like a little movie in your head, but it's much more. It's much more personal because it's right in your head.
In order to understand what a comic book is saying, you must read both the words and the pictures. And this is a complex skill. To know the cues, to be able to pick up the cues from the images, and to weave the interrelationship of the words and pictures so that you understand the narrative is actually a very sophisticated skill.
It's interactive, and you're using more than one part of your brain at the same time. It's not passive like watching a television show where someone else is pacing everything for you.
The reason comics is really hitting with people is because I believe our culture is becoming more visually oriented.
Librarians and teachers didn't quite want to consider comics as literature and reading. And so Jeff was invited to a lot of library conferences to explain, how comics is reading. And he would give these fabulous presentations and really turn the tide of their way of thinking.
The librarians got it. The librarians understand that it's reading. And in fact, the reason we were invited to talk to them is because, as they explained to us, circulation in library shelves is dropping and has been as a trend for many, many years, with one exception. The shelves that have graphic novels on them are going up in circulation. And at that time, I was told that they had gone up like 300% across the country. So graphic novels were something that librarians were suddenly seeing as a growth market, something that could get kids to read.
Librarians said, this is our gateway for these people that will not read. They will start here and then they move on to other things, and it worked.
The magic quality of drawing mixed with the fact that you can create worlds, you can make anything you want out of a picture, really attracted me to comics.
And we now understand that the comic book format can tell any kind of story. And I think part of that is the influence of manga, Japanese comics, in this country, because the tradition in Japan is very long, and they understand that any kind of story from the history of Buddhism to the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima or pornography can be told in this format.
It's not just muscle-bound mesomorphs punching criminals in the face anymore. It's something bigger.
This looks like a job for Superman.
I have nothing against science fiction books, but science fiction books don't dominate the book trade. Why should they dominate comics? You should have all kinds of different books in comic form, and you can.
There are people who are speaking to issues of gender or ethnic identity or international concerns. People like Marjane Satrapi, who writes about growing up in Iran, or Alison Bechdel, who writes about growing up as a lesbian. All of these people are finding different markets. They're rising to success, but it's not the same standard of success. Not the same audience, not the same markets, not the same model. And that's incredibly healthy.
If comics is a legitimate art form, it isn't a bastard stepchild. You have the ability as an artist to express any thought, any feeling in the medium. It depends on your facility with the tools and your heart.
I mean, it's a great field to get into in that it's so unexplored that, and there's so much room for original work.
Where a Jeff Smith stands on one part of the comics globe, and the curve of that planet is severe enough that you can't even see from him all the way over to Alison Bechdel or an Art Spiegelman or a Paul Pope or whoever. These people are working in such an expanding continent that you can no longer see the one for the other.
You always think about, at least I always did, like this this romantic notion, like you've got, you know, Paris 1906, and you've got, you know, Juan Gris, and he's in a studio with Picasso, like, you know, and they're influence each other's work, and you're like, gosh, I wish I could live in Paris in 1906 and know Stravinsky and, you know, Balanchine and all these different artists. And then you think like, well, you know, in a sense, comics does have that, because you've got a community of guys. Like, we all don't live in one city, but Bohemia now is not a place anymore, it's an idea.
We're also fans of comics, and when we see a comic that we really like, and then, you know, you go to a convention, or, you know, you get a phone call from the person who created that, and they just tell us, you know, how much they were inspired by Bone or by Jeff. It's just kind of like that really cool circle of life thing.
How has the audience changed? Like, typical question in 1995, let's say, at a San Diego comic convention, you know, from like some 35-year-old software engineer. How is that audience different from, you know, the 13-year-old?
Well, for one thing, you can look right out here and you can see women.
Yeah.
You can see children. In 1995, I used to sit on panels with you, and we would look out and go, man, guys, wouldn't it be fun if there were chicks in here? I thought there would be kids at comic book stores, but there just weren't any. But again, like it's changing. In the last 10 years, you see kids, you know, going into comic book stores. You see couples, young couples. You'll see two girlfriends.
I'm happy that I can go into a store and buy something for someone and know that no matter who they are, I can find something I think they're going to like, even if they've never picked up a comic book in their life. And that makes me feel really good.
It's exciting. It's very different now.
Today, Jeff Smith continues to work at his craft, telling new stories and creating new projects. His fan base continues to grow, and his work continues to be recognized and honored. Looking back at his amazing career, you can see now that it actually began at age 5. It's been a remarkable journey, and there are millions of fans who are glad that he invited them along.
I think that Bone will be around for many, many years because it's a story that bears rereading, and it's timeless.
Jeff's like the real thing. Like, there's those of us that are good, right? And then there's those of us who are like demigods walking the earth, right? And just one of them. He just is.
He wrote and drew a comic book that you could tell he really loved.
His work is classic in the sense that once you've seen it, it's hard to ever imagine that there was a time that it wasn't there.
I can read Bone, and it is a living document to me. It's something that lives, and it's also an instance of great cartooning, where I can just call him like, man, great job, man, you did it. You know, it's a great feeling to be able to say, well done to your friend.
I think the most important thing Jeff has done, though, is to bring us his worldview about what is moral and what is immoral, and his belief that we need to work to make the world a better place, and that we can make a difference in our world. And I think Jeff believes that at the core of his being, and that is reflected in his work on Bone.
You can't fake it. You know, you can't fool the people. They know if you're being sincere or honest through this work.
He just, you know, inspires so many and makes so many people happy. And, you know, what's better than, you know, teaching people how to read?
He really enjoys life. He strikes me as one of those artists who genuinely enjoys life. Some who work in comics do so because they can escape from the social sphere. It's because they're not very socially adept. They work better with a pen in their hand, and they just would rather bury their head in a drawing board and eventually, you know, once in a while come out and mumble a few words and then go back to work. Jeff is not one of those. I think Jeff enjoys living in the world as much as he does living on the drawing board. Life is, I think, the signature thing with Jeff. He's all about life. He wants to create life on the paper. He wants to create a life for himself. And as much as he loves art, art isn't the point. The point is using art to create life and then enjoying life away from art as well.